check this out because I said, well, Good. I don't know if we know code. Okay.
Mr. Chair, item 1 is communication from the Mayor and City Ethics Commission relative to the appointment of Mr. Rushmore Cervantes as the permanent general manager to the Los Angeles Housing and Community Investment Department.
Mr. Rushmore, Mr. Cervantes.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, members of the committee.
Want to tell something about yourself?
I'm an Aries. I like long walks on the beach.
Purple.
In all seriousness, it is an absolute pleasure and an honor to be nominated by the mayor for this important job. And I mean that in that I've worked in several departments in my 20-plus year career, and I can't think of a department that is positioned to provide such meaningful services to those that are in most need in the city of Los Angeles, from the standpoint of our family source centers who touch on the lives of young youth, to ensure that children stay in school, to ensuring that we've got safe, decent housing for all the constituents in the city of Los Angeles residing in multifamily units, to the creation of affordable housing for not only families but also for seniors. We run the gamut as well as homeless people. We run the gamut of services is complex, but managing the consolidated plan that we do now really enables the city and the department to be able to drive the agenda for services to be aligned with other city services and funding, along with county as well as outside sources. So I think in this new era of doing more with less, doing more with collaboration, doing more with transparency has just led us to a point where I think this department, 1 year from its new creation, is now well positioned to be able to assist the city in many fronts to be able to help build communities around the city. So it's just it's a wonderful challenge, and I'm backed by a tremendous staff that's dedicated to the position, dedicated to the core functions that we provide. They're hardworking, and many of them there are sitting behind me. Some of the core leadership are behind me, fully supportive of what we're trying to achieve. And these are long-term city employees that are dedicated to what we're trying to accomplish on behalf of the council, the individual council districts, but most importantly, the constituents we serve. And I'm here to answer any questions you may have.
Colleagues?
Well, I want to congratulate the mayor and the appointment, and you, obviously, for stepping up and your willingness to have been interim and proceed as general manager. What we've done in the past, at least I have, is sort of ask folks how you will measure success and victory in terms of a plan going forward. But it's difficult to ask you that because we've had the opportunity and the real pleasure on my part to work with you now for over a year on the mission that this new department has. And I still, I think, for the record, would like to hear from you what it is that you think sort of the next couple of months to year look like in terms of success. And while it may be repetitive to me because we've had long conversations, I think it's important to sort of memorialize the fact that this new department has a tremendous amount of sort of tools within it. And it also has, I think, a tremendous amount of sort of need for additional resources, which hopefully with the expertise that's collected now around the city council and the availability of more resources at the state level, hopefully will be of more of assistance to you to advocate for those resources. But, in short, what does sort of the next year or two look like, months, a year or two look like for the department, and how can we sort of help in that mission?
Well, thank you very much for the question. And as you know, we're here not as a housing department, but we're community builders. Our goal is to create sustainable communities, and with the limited resources, it's time for alignment. it's time for us to come forward with a needs-based approach to how we're going to address, as an example, housing. We all know about what's happened at the elimination of the redevelopment agency and the loss of $50 million a year. We know about the loss of the federal entitlements over the last 5 years. It's well documented. But what needs to be documented is what is our strategic plan as a city on a go-forward basis that contemplates both efforts that are federally based, locally based, state-based as far as funding, but not necessarily all necessarily funding related. It has to go to the preservation of existing projects. It goes to a matter of density bonuses, how we're going to address that. And then within the framework of a plan that we need to achieve, if you look at the regional housing needs assessment as an example, that's good for the next 8 years, you look at the overall need of housing, not just affordable, but just housing. Where are we as far as achieving that over the next 8 years? And from that, you can tell by the lack of affordable housing based on the rent burden, what that number is, and put that on the board, and this is what we have to design a program around to try to achieve. Now, we may not be able to achieve that number based on just the sheer number of units we need to achieve, but we certainly, as a city, we better be on our way to getting better at what we're doing now to be able to cobble together not just minimal resources from the federal government, but have an action plan that's based on an agreed-upon number and a goal that we want to achieve. I was having a discussion about this morning, and it's not just about the issues that we're facing for affordable housing, but what we're also dealing with is the effects of people not being able to find affordable housing, and you see it in some multifamily units, but primarily single-family units where you've got illegally converted garages, the granny flats. So that's the effect that the council members are seeing in their districts, and how do we address that as well? Because we have the lofty goals of what we need to achieve, both from preservation as well as creating affordable housing, as well as workforce housing, but also how are we going to address those units in single-family, multifamily to either bring them up to code, enable them to be grandfathered in. I mean, there has to be some drastic measures taken here to be able to address that as well, because displacing those individuals is going to just create more of a burden on the existing housing stock that is not near a place to be able to accommodate the number of people that need housing. As it relates to services, we're working closely with the LA Unified School District to have 13 counselors in each of 13 counselors in 13 of our family source centers, with the primary focus to ensure that we have our children staying in school. That's one of the key issues that we need to address. They'll have access to the school records so that they can actually work with the parents and to be able to guide them through to where they need to be able to ensure that they are able to keep their kids in school, as well as access services for themselves. You have to look at it from a holistic standpoint. So it starts at the beginning and then goes to housing. As it relates to greening the city, we've just now rolled out our Gateway to Green program, which utilizes our existing code inspectors to go out to the community into the multi-unit properties. And in addition to doing the habitability inspections they now look at all energy efficient opportunities. They educate the property manager and the owner as to what's available to them from the Department of Water and Power, as to all the rebates, as all the incentives that's available to them at low cost or no cost to them, that they can improve the individual units and the overall common area. It's a great benefit to the Department of Water and Power because it helps them, enable them to reduce the draw off the grid. It also enables them to understand what's going on in their 760,000 units that they don't really know what's going on. We provide them information, a report, so they understand on a go-forward basis across the city what their housing stock looks like that they have not previously been able to penetrate. So it's a win-win for both the Department of Water and Power as well as the constituents that we're serving. We're also working with the Southern California Gas Company. They have a similar goal, but they don't have access to those units like we do. So we're trying to collaborate with the SoCal Gas to be able to, at least in part, be able to provide maybe some of those services for them. But what the nice thing is about that, they even have more resources than the Department of Water and Power, and want to leverage that kind of relationship so that we can bring more resources to the multifamily units. Certainly when we talk about preserving units, when we do rehabilitation of these units, we can extend the life of those buildings but also make them more energy efficient. Preservation. We know we can't build our way out of this crisis, but we have to look at how we're going to be addressing those projects that are having expiring covenants. We recently just executed a contract with the grant from the MacArthur Foundation so we can actually look specifically at the CRA properties that we inherited, where we understand there's quite a few, approximately 3,500 units potentially could be expiring by the end of 2015. These are covenants that have CRA covenants on them, but no other federal funds. We have to come up with an immediate strategy in which we can address those, educate the property owners, and try to convince them, if we can, perhaps through 4% bond financing, to be able to continue the affordability covenants while we can rehabilitate those properties. So when I talk about Southern California Gas coming in with that component of that, that would help not only rehab, but also make them more energy efficient. We look at the homelessness issues. The mayor just recently signed up for the mayor's challenge with the White House to end veteran homelessness by 2015. That's an aggressive goal, and we're going to work closely with the mayor's office along with the Los Angeles Homeless Services Authority, as well as the Housing Authority, who we already have a very good relationship with, to put more dollars out in the street for veteran housing. The Housing Authority is going to be receiving additional VASH vouchers. We're also working collaboratively between the Housing Authority and us to try to ensure that we get the maximum amount we possibly can from the Prop 41 dollars. These are bond dollars, $600 million that were made available specifically for veteran homelessness. The nice thing about Prop 41 dollars is that, unlike federally funded veteran homeless or veteran housing programs, those programs require that you have a discharge that is honorable or other than honorable. Unfortunately, the real problem with the veteran homelessness is those that receive bad conduct discharge or dishonorable discharges. They're the ones that are the biggest drain on the system. These Prop 41 dollars can be utilized for that specific cohort. There's no limitations. So that will be really we'll design programs to be able to address that low-hanging fruit, because they're the people that we're really concerned about, just like we are concerned about the chronically homeless population. We also are going to have to, in the near future, address what the city as a whole is going to do once the city has addressed the Jones settlement. The Jones settlement was a settlement between the city of Los Angeles and plaintiffs where the city was not providing sufficient amount of housing for homeless. And as a result, the court rendered a decision that the city could not carry out its authority to sweep the sidewalks in the downtown Skid Row area of homeless people from the sidewalks between 9 p.m. and 6 a.m. in the morning. Well, we've already achieved the goal of 625 units in the downtown Skid Row area, and we're well on our way to achieve the 625. We're going to exceed that in the outer-lying areas of the downtown Skid Row area within the city of Los Angeles. We'll have those completed probably by the end of September, October of next year. We'll probably have to have a third-party neutral validate those numbers, and we'll have to go back to the Ninth Circuit to confirm that we did, in fact, satisfy the settlement. But then becomes a bigger policy for the city as to what we're going to do thereafter. So, as you can tell, that's going to be a major issue that we're going to have to grapple with, and to have to determine just how much money we want to allocate for creation of homelessness issues on a go-forward basis. But we need to have those conversations now so it doesn't just jump up and surprise us. So we're just putting on the record that we're going to have that dialogue now. And many of you sat here on a separate matter to discuss the city's utilization of the community-based development organizations and how the federal government determined that the city was not utilizing that designation properly. We were looking at the neighborhood revitalization strategy area. It's a provision within the HUD regulations. Initial blush did not look like it was very effective for the city. However, we did receive, we had updated that analysis with the 2010 census data. It's good and bad. The good thing is, from the information is that perhaps it could be utilized based on that information in certain parts of the city. So we're exploring that a little further. The bad news is the result of that is the fact that it shows that the city of Los Angeles is worse than it was 10 years prior. So be that as may, we're still exploring that. We're going to be coming back to committee and council to discuss, how we think we can approach utilizing CDBG dollars on a go-forward basis for our social service dollars in a more expansive way as much as possible, but again, on a targeted level. The department continues to do some deep dives in certain communities, doing assessments of targeted areas so that we can come up with investment strategies to be able to work with the consolidated plan and be able to identify investment strategies for a 2 to 3 to 4 year period so that we can show marketed change in communities so that we can have a significant impact. And again, it won't just be about CDBG dollars, it'll be a neighborhood improvement fund dollars, it'll be working with economic and workforce investment dollars, working with the public works departments, police department, recreation parks, and then with the County of Los Angeles as well. The goal is to provide a roadmap for the council members for the specific targeted areas. This will also align nicely with the Great Streets initiatives. Each council person has a great street identified in their area, and that's going to become, once again, an area of key investments that we can look at both commercial and residential in the same area as far as coming up with strategic investment strategies so that we can showcase that and then move on to the next area and the next area after that. The bottom line is that there's a number of different areas where we need to be looking at. I mean, we've got our 6 commissions that we work with. I was just speaking with our executive director from Human Relations, who was sent staff out to address an officer-involved shooting just yesterday. So that's part of what we do as well. We go out to the community and try to quell any issues in the community as best that we can. And we need to make sure that we've got the proper resources to be able to address the community needs as well. So the same token, with those commissions, we try to work with them as best we can so that we're hearing what the community needs from their various perspectives, so that helps inform policy as well. So there's a number of different fronts that we're working on. I think that we're well positioned to be able to bring forward over the next 6 to 12 months some meaningful, specific goals and objectives that will be not just for short term but for the long term, that we can actually build foundations on a go-forward basis that don't just involve this department but involve multiple interagency involvement, city, county, and the like.
Thank you.
Well, I want to thank you for your service as an interim. And
You're welcome.
Look forward to your approval and appointment.
Thank you.
Our offices work closely with you on all the fronts that you discussed, and I know it's especially challenging when we have limited resources. The challenge is to try to leverage those in a way that makes sense. Focusing on affordable housing for a minute, as you mentioned, it is a priority. It's certainly a citywide priority and a priority in districts situated like mine. And we found that the nonprofits have kind of filled that space with low-income, special need housing, senior housing projects that have made a difference and have really impacted our community. How can we do a better job of assisting these nonprofits as they go about their rather focused, targeted tasks of providing services frequently when nobody else is interested in doing that?
Right. Well, let me first say that with diminishing resources on all fronts, the service providers that have become accustomed to receiving sources of funds from these, from the city, from these various sources, as it dries up, some of them may not continue to provide services, at least being funded by the city. It's just, at this point, it would seem like a mathematical certainty that some may or may not be able to continue just because there's just not enough money to go around. If you look at the $108 million that the trust fund used to have 5 years ago to the $24 million that we have the current year, I mean, there just aren't enough projects to go around. So we're going to have to manage that and manage expectations with developers. At the same time, it's incumbent upon this department, and we do meet with the developers and property managers on both to discuss covenants and monitoring the covenants, but also which is very important to developers and managers, is on the loan portfolio and how we administer the loan portfolio and how we calculate residual receipts. And that's very important because from a couple of standpoints is that on one hand, we want to be fiscally prudent and make sure we bring in enough resources in the maximum amount we can to ensure that we can repopulate the Affordable Housing Trust Fund. On the other hand, we are a mission-driven organization in the extent that we're trying to ensure that there's sufficient resources with that nonprofit that is providing valuable services to the constituents. As an example, we heard what the property managers were saying about the perm sort of housing operational dollars. They said $800 per unit per year was not sufficient. We raised it to $4,000 so that there was sufficient operating subsidies to ensure that they could maintain the services on a go-forward basis. That's an example of listening to what the needs are and trying to meet that. By giving up $3,200 per year for a building or per unit, that means there's less money going into the residual receipts, but that means better services for the constituents and perhaps a little bit more for the property manager. So that's the type of dialogue that we've had in the past, the type of dialogue we need to have in the future. When it comes time to refinancing, resyndication policies, we look at when we're doing these refinances, there's cash flow coming out of this, and we have to come to some sort of meeting of the minds. The policymakers is that what's a fair share for the developer and what's a fair share to the city, because we both have competing interests and competing needs, and try to come to a happy medium. And that's one of the things that we're going to be bringing to this committee and council within the next 2 months or so. And certainly you and I have had some discussions about that, and we have our report ready to roll, and you'll be hearing the policy discussion, and we really want to open it up to see, to hear both sides.
Go ahead. You mentioned the housing, the homeless issue.
Yes.
Likely homeless especially. And again, how it's a challenge citywide. We've got a Band-Aid solution now, it looks like, in Skid Row, but that still doesn't address the broader problem. I'm told that the Section 8 vouchers provide the greatest potential for housing the homeless, chronically homeless population. Have you given any thought, or is there any discussion going on to how we allocate these vouchers, the role the city plays in prioritizing where the vouchers go, and how we could be more effective in allocating these scarce resources to those in need?
Councilman, we work very closely with the Housing Authority, who administers both Section 8 vouchers as well as project-based vouchers, in particular the project-based vouchers. Section 8, those are given to individuals that meet the qualifications, and they can go anywhere they need to with that voucher. The public project-based vouchers are the ones we work closely with the department, as we populate our pipeline with supportive housing projects that need the vouchers. We have a very collaborative process by which that we work together to identify sufficient number of project-based vouchers that can support the project-based the projects that we're going to roll out. But for that project-based voucher, it won't be placed in service. They have to go hand in hand. So we've got a very effective means by which that we work collaboratively together to the maximum amount that we can utilize their vouchers. We do. So it's a good working process.
Are you satisfied with the way that process is working now?
I think there's always room for improvement. We're somewhat limited in the amount of money that we have in capital dollars as well as tax credits. So even if Housing Authority had 4 times as much as far as vouchers, we wouldn't necessarily have sufficient amount of capital dollars and tax credits to meet the number of vouchers they may have. So we try to align to maximize what they have as well as what we have.
Thank you.
Sure.
Okay. So what's the most vexing problem for housing?
There is just not enough housing in the city of Los Angeles for all the residents in the city, whether it be low income or the working class middle income. If you look at middle-income individuals $50,000 per year. 38% of them are rent burdened as well. It's just become such a problem for most in the city of Los Angeles. Most of the development you see downtown, as an example, that looks great. It's great for the economy, but that's going to only achieve housing for the higher end. It's not going to be able to assist those that are middle income. It's certainly not going to help those that are the low income. With our small amount of money that we do have to create affordable housing, we're able to help some. But the middle class are the ones that are really taking the biggest hit in some instances. And I'm not saying that they're more needy than that of the low income. I'm just saying from this overall standpoint, we're just not meeting the needs for housing, period, in the city. And that's why you see what's going on in communities around the city, where you've got granny flats and illegally converted garages and the like. People need housing. So the solution, as I mentioned earlier at the beginning of my presentation, that we need to come up with a goal, both for housing as a whole as well as for affordable housing, and then agree upon the 3 to 4 different tools that we think that can achieve that. And that means preserving existing affordable housing. That means looking at the rent stabilization ordinance and strengthening it to make it more difficult for property owners to remove it from the marketplace. And of course, identifying resources, and it can't come all just from the city. We've got to think creatively as how best we can identify multiple sources of funding. There's not going to be one fix. There's going to be multiple fixes. But I think that we need to really agree upon what that goal is that we want to achieve over the next 3 to 4 years, and setting forth the different methods by which that we think we can get there. And it's going to take a tremendous heavy lift. It's going to take some controversial decision-making. I remember a couple of years ago, we had the rent stabilization ordinance study heard in committee and council. Those are not pleasant conversations, but they need to be had. There's a Nexus study that was commissioned several years ago that contemplated a fee on development that could create a flow of monies for affordable housing. That'll be equally as controversial. Density bonuses, equally controversial. So there are solutions, but I think we agree upon what the plan is first, and then we have the discussion about which ones we're willing to support. And not one of them is going to be easy. They're all going to be challenging, but you need to have several of them approved by the mayor and council in order for us to be able to ultimately achieve what we need to for the city.
Anybody else? So how do we get out of the way of developers? I hear a lot of laments that it's just impossible to do business with the city.
Well,
our office spends an inordinate amount of time trying to.
Well, it depends what you're looking at. I mean, that's part of what we need to look at when we talk about housing in general, and not just necessarily affordable housing, but you look at the CEQA process timing, you look at the timing it takes to go through planning, the time it takes to get through building a safety, and that's not even talking about working with the housing department and all the federal regulations that we have. What we need to do to be able to get out of the way is to really have both housing, planning, building and safety, try to work on a process by which that we can expedite, to the greatest extent we can, the approval process for housing, while ensuring that we obviously protecting that is valuable to the city relative to environment and affordable housing. So there are methods by which we can get there. It takes a will of the 2-3 departments at the direction of the mayor and council to modify its current approaches.
make the motion that we approve Mr. Rushmore Cervantes as General Manager for the Housing Community Investment Development Department.
Thank you, Councilman.
And we'll hold that motion while we hear from the public. Mr. Clark, Apartment Association of Greater Los Angeles. And Larry Gross. Rush, you can stay up here.
Yeah, let him. Because this is going to be a picture.
Yeah. Just like Simon and Garfunkel.
I'm telling you. It's very rare that we come together, so I guess since I was called first, all right. Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, thank you for granting me this time to speak about my colleague Rushmore Cervantes. I'm Jim Clark with the Apartment Association of Greater Los Angeles, and obviously you know that we have a very close relationship, or now we have a closer working relationship with the Housing Department. I'll tell you, back when I started 10 years ago with this organization, it was tough to even get in the door over there. I mean, it was no secret that that the department, we felt, harbored animosity toward owners of apartment buildings who house 64% of the people in this city. And we thought it was completely unfair. And, through a number of years of changes, we wound up with an interim general manager in Rushmore, and that was before, I think, that was the first time you were interim, which was, and we saw the doors beginning to open there, and it was carried on a little bit more by Mr. Guthrie, and then when Rushmore came back in as interim, we were very, very pleased because the door began to open even more, and there was just a lot more communication. Things were more fair. We developed at the behest of Chairman Cardenas of this committee a working group between tenants and owners, which exists today, and I think that Rushmore was the catalyst in not only getting that going, but also keeping it going today. We meet on a very regular basis. We're working on common issues, one that I think a couple of you know about, and that is to get those non-conforming units, non-permitted units that are out there that are being closed down, getting them permitted so that the tenants can remain in those. That's just one example. So I just want to say that my organization supports the appointment of Rushmore to the general manager's position because of fairness. Thank you.
Larry Gross, Coalition for Economic Survival. I'd like to praise the mayor for providing us with an extremely qualified choice for general manager, and I urge that Rushmore Cervantes be unanimously approved. With the city facing such a severe housing crisis, particularly when it comes to lack of affordable housing, you need a special person to lead us. With housing funding cuts, restrictions on inclusionary housing, increases in tenants' rent burden, new Ellis Act evictions on the horizon, and government affordable housing restrictions expiring. These are the challenges before us. Thus, the position requires someone with very unique skill sets who's committed to and has the ability to effectively take on these challenges. Someone who has the support of his staff, a person who can balance the interests of for-profit and nonprofit developers, as well as mediate the tensions between tenant and landlord groups. I believe Rushmore Cervantes is that person. I know that he's up for these incredible challenges. Rushmore is well respected and has the trust of the many key stakeholders that are working to address our housing crisis and needs, and that's why we're sitting here together at this table, and that's why Rushmore has my support, my organization's support, and he should have your support, and thus I urge his unanimous confirmation. So thank you.
Do you want to lead us in Kumbaya too?
I thought it was bridge over troubled waters.
Well, with that, I mean, we don't want to say anything else other than let's move the motion. We have a motion. Put it back on the floor. Tuesday the 16th, we'll send this recommendation. It'll be in council. Congratulations.
Thank you very much. Look forward to working with all of you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, that takes us to item 2, which is a CAO report relative to authorization for 12 grant-funded exempt positions and reallocation of existing position authority for the NSP program.
Okay.
Michael Garcia from the CAO's office. Today, we seek the council's approval for 12 grant-funded positions needed to continue the acquisition, rehabilitation, and sale of foreclosed and abandoned housing properties to meet Neighborhood Stabilization Program grant requirements. The positions will be exempt for a term of 2 years, with one possible 1-year extension, with the exception of one senior clerk typist, which we recommend be filled by an existing vacant regular authority. The positions are necessary to perform expected program closeout activities and manage the expected program income receipts from the sale of the rehabilitated properties. HCID reports the funding sources for the positions will be provided by a combination of NSP funds from a series of grants from the United States Department of Housing and Urban Development. After the grant program and funding ends, the NSP exempt positions will not be continued, and the HCID anticipates entering the grant closeout agreement once all their multifamily projects are occupied with tenants, which will likely happen in fiscal year 2015-2016. And we're here for any questions you may have.
Questions. The Neighborhood Stabilization Program is an interesting one. How many properties have gone through this program, and how many are left? And is there a breakdown of where they are per council district?
Yeah, Councilman Price and other councilmen, Doug Swager with the Housing and Community Investment Department. The program began back in 2009, I would say, and we've to date affected over 900 housing units. And it's a mix of single-family homes that have been purchased and rehabilitated and sold to first-time home buyers along
What's the number you said?
over 924 to date. Also, there's been some new construction of affordable housing using the funds through the Affordable Housing Trust Fund, as well as a number of smaller multifamily properties, 2 to 4 units that have been purchased. And yeah, of course we have the breakdown by council districts. The program sort of followed the foreclosures in the city. So, since 2007, there's been over 75,000 units foreclosed in the city. And the majority of those were in South Los Angeles and up in the San Fernando Valley. And
75,000 units foreclosed since when?
2007. And the program, the majority of, we selected neighborhoods that were most impacted by foreclosures, and those are the neighborhoods where we focus the program. So the vast majority of the homes that we've improved or constructed are in South Los Angeles, up in San Fernando Valley.
How were the sales of these properties handled? I mean, how do we be sure they were first-time home buyers versus investors, or or how do you?
Yeah, it was, they had to be all sold to low and moderate income households. So all the buyers had incomes below 120% of the area median income. And so they're all sold to, homeowners. People are going to live in the houses, except for the multifamily properties. And those were transferred to other mission-driven nonprofits that will provide, affordable housing to tenants for a minimum period of 55 years.
If there's a profit on the sale of the property, where does that money go? Or does it go back to the...
No, the program income is reported back to HUD, but it comes to the department in order to invest in more of the same type properties, foreclosed properties that have been abandoned or vacant. And so we've generated to date, we expect to generate about $33 million in program income. We've had to use about $28 million of that just to finish the work that we started. And so there'll be another, let's say, $6 to $7 million of program income from the program that at this point in time, the intent is to make that available to support the Affordable Housing Trust Fund.
And I want to add that the report recommends that the department report back on a detailed accounting of all their units occupied and projects going forward.
When do we get that?
There's no time limit on the report back.
Can we get that in 2 weeks?
Can you break down by district?
I can send you a breakdown by district in, a day. A report back might take a little bit longer than 2 weeks. It's a good report. It'll be worth waiting for.
Well, I'm just trying to figure out, how do you feel? I mean, we maximize, I look at $140 million more or less to respond to 75,000 foreclosures. And we hit 1,000 units. I mean, it's a small, significant for each household, but it's a small percentage, right? So
It's a drop in the bucket in addressing the need, I would say. And there will be more units as we go forward with the program income. I think, we could have done more units had we focused solely on multifamily, new development, leveraging tax credit and other resources. We tried to address, the actual foreclosure issue. So we did a lot of single-family homes, smaller, like I said, 2 to 4 unit apartment buildings that have been foreclosed upon. These were what we were seeing, so this is where we put the money. And, we made a policy decision to buy and rehabilitate the worst properties we could find in the neighborhoods with the thought that if we could turn around the worst properties, that would have the most impact on the neighborhoods. And, there are other people buying other properties that weren't willing to make the investment that we made in them. And so, these, I think, policies, decisions, in a lot of instances, we put more money into the properties than we could sell them for. And that was the nature of the program. So when you talk about addressing the whole foreclosure crisis, it wasn't enough. They could have never given us enough money to do that. But when you talk in terms of having impact, I think, in the areas wherein we worked and to the people that we served, it's a good report, I think. In addition to, some of the housing units, we're able to work with Rec and Parks and take foreclosed properties that were in, very poor condition and tear them down and turn them into, I think, 9 pocket parks we were able to open. Significant number of jobs were created, in the construction and real estate industry. And all this stuff we tracked very closely. And that's all the kinds of stuff that, I'm speaking sort of not off the top of my head because I'm prepared, but that would be contained in a report back to, the city council, as well as, what we report to HUD every quarter.
Okay. Mr. Bryce? All right, thank you. Thank you. Receiving this.
Mr. Chair, would the committee be taking an action on this item?
I think we're going to adopt the report. We're going to get a report back in 2 weeks. There's going to be a breakdown by districts. Is that our agreement? Yep. Okay. Item number 3.
Item number 3 is HCID, CAO, and CLA reports relative to authorization to release the Neighborhood Improvement Fund call for projects. And I will be giving the report, Mr. Chair, so I'll be moving to the center here.
Do you want me to introduce the
What's
the CEO's report?
Mr. Chair, I just to give a quick summary of the background on this item, I'm Clay McCarter with the CLA's office. In April, the committee considered reports from HCID and the CAO on the Neighborhood Improvement Fund, or NIF, call for projects. At that meeting, the CLA's office was instructed to provide an additional report, which is before you today. To provide some background on the NIF, because it's been some time since we last discussed it, it was established as part of the city's 2013-14 consolidated plan and the fund has a current balance of $2.6 million. This program is funded by federal community development block grant funds, and it's designed to provide neighborhood improvement projects in the city. Because it's funded by federal funds, the projects must meet certain federal requirements, as well as projects must require the support of the council member in whose district the project is located. Following our review of the call for projects, we recommend 2 amendments that would allow more projects to be competitive for NIF funding and encompass more neighborhoods of the city. The first amendment that we recommend would be to delete the 100% match requirement for project budgets at or below $250,000. The Housing Department proposes that the NIF program provide gap financing only, and the thought was that for smaller projects such as sidewalk reconstruction, the project budget could only be perhaps $200,000. So it would be onerous to require those projects to then go out and get 100% match requirement. In that example, if the project was $200,000, they could get $100,000 from the NIF, but then also would be required to find $100,000 from another source. So because of this, we recommend deleting the match requirement for projects at or below $250,000. Because under the NIF program, the maximum dollar amount you can receive from the program is $250,000. Our second amendment would be to delete the inclusion of the Great Streets Initiative and the Promise Zone from the evaluation factors used to score proposed projects. The Housing Department reports that priority will be given to projects that are located in these areas, and the CLA's office feels that giving priority to applicants for being part of the Great Streets or the Promise Zone places too many potential projects at a disadvantage. And so by removing these from factors in the scoring, we can open up the NIF funding and ensure that more neighborhoods are competitive. So with that, I'll take your questions.
Mr. Fuentes, your thoughts on these?
No questions. I'd move to adopt the CLA's report.
Mr. Price?
Yeah, I'll support that motion. I just have a couple of questions, though. So why are we creating this new program? I'm still kind of confused. Why is it necessary because we got these funds left over, we have the funds left over, we need to place the funds somewhere?
The program was created to provide neighborhood improvements in districts. The funding can be used for site clearance, new construction, reconstruction of sidewalks, facade improvements, that kind of thing.
Yeah. And so how is it different from the traditional community block grant funding program?
It's a line item in the block grant program as part of the comp plan. In the 39th program year is when the NIF was first announced and established, and it remains. But none of the funding. The program still hasn't. The call for projects haven't been released yet, so the projects would be able to use this comp plan funding for those kinds of neighborhood improvement projects.
So can the council office apply? The nonprofit has to apply?
Yeah, so city departments.
Walk us through a potential.
Yeah, so city departments can apply, nonprofits can apply outside, both inside and outside the city family can apply for this funding.
Hello, this is Ed Gibson, Housing Community Investment Department. I just add on to what Clay is commenting on. Nonprofits, they were designed to go through the city council offices so you had an idea of what was going on and what was being proposed inside your council districts. The key reason why the program was set up is to, one, it was to leverage, because one of the problems we have here is we need to leverage all the dollars we have, so when you don't leverage, we end up paying for everything, and then you don't have people who actually have some interest in making sure something moves forward. But with that said, on the smaller projects, it was designed as a gap program so that something that was already proposed in some area and it had a gap, we could get the money, get it to them, and get it done quickly as opposed to a brand new project that somebody wants to start from the beginning and pay for the whole thing, which is going to take at least 2 years if you're not already down the way. So that's one of the reasons why it was proposed in that way. And then the other aspect that was inside of there was when we talked about, great streets for other things, it's really more so not about those specific items, but areas that had place-based strategies. Did you have a strategy going on inside your area? And we want to recognize that if this is a piece that you need plugged that's part of a larger strategy for how you spend your funds, that makes sense for all of us. And so we wanted to acknowledge that and include that in there along the way. The reason why the program came in the size that it did inside the consolidated plan budget is that we allocate in our process larger sums of monies for bigger projects along the way. But we don't have anything that deals with the smaller scale projects. And whereas I'd love to see the program ranging between 100 and a half a million, we only have so many funds available on this line item. But we have these smaller projects, they have a need, and they need to be able to have a way to be competitive and compete for these funds inside the entire cycle. So this mechanism kind of gives them that opportunity to have access to these funds where they're maybe not be the big projects, but they're important community projects that support all the stuff in our communities.
So in the criteria, it's pretty clearly laid out, project readiness, community impact, capacity, financial. Where does the council office weigh in? How does the council office
They have to,
assert some priority? How do you recognize the council office interest in one project versus another?
they have to come get a letter from you. And so what you have to do is when the application period comes open, pretty much, the time will come in and you have to acknowledge which ones are more important to you inside your council district to move forward. And then that is to support, those are the ones that you're going to support to help give us input on what you think is more important in your area. And then we're going to put it through the filter of who's ready, what's really eligible, and along that lines as we go through the project. I mean, the bottom line is that if this isn't something that's going to work for the council district and the city and the community, then maybe it's the wrong project at the wrong time, and maybe it'll be a later date, and you're not going to prioritize it as such when it comes before you. But the bottom line is we need to make sure it's in line with all the strategies, and not everybody out there who happens to have a project happens to know everything that's going inside a council district and all the activities you may have, so that input is very valuable from the council offices.
Thank you. Good. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll second that motion.
Okay. So what are we doing? We're adopting?
So we recommend you adopt the sailing report.
We, so moved? Unanimous? Okay. That's it? All matters addressed?
No speaker cards.
No cards? This meeting is done.
All right.